What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a new stop motion claymation film that's coming out, and that film is called Memoir of a Snail. Written and directed by Elliot, this film stars people like Snook, Kodi, Smit-McPhee, Jackie Weaver, Bana, and many more. So here we are talking about a new stop motion claymation film known as Memoir of a Snail. I've been hearing things about this film over the course of the last few months as it began to premiere at various film festivals, and here we are now as it's starting its limited theatrical run, and it actually just came into my local area. The kind folks behind this film though did send me a digital screener to the film, which is how I ended up watching it, so a big thanks to them for that. But yeah, going into this I was pretty excited. This comes from writer-director Elliot, who started his career in the stop motion claymation world with 1996's Uncle, and is probably best known for his film from 2009 known as Mary and Max. So here we are all these years later as he's doing his next feature-length film in the stop motion genre. And while I haven't covered an abundance of stop motion related things here on the channel, I have talked about many a times that it's one of my favorite genres of all time, and I have praised so many films because I just think it's one of the most unique genres and one of the most hard-working kind of crafts to create. To be able to make a stop motion film takes many years. I mean, you can't really just make this, you know, and that goes for the same for animation, but animation has come to a different place when it comes down to a lot of 3D animation. There's an ability, especially when they have a lot of people working on it, to really kind of craft those movies and kind of make the pieces move a little bit quicker versus something like stop motion that does really kind of rely on patience and time. And I think when you look at a full-length film that's stop motion, you just have to praise it. And while there's really nice pristine stuff that comes from studios like Leica these days, I have always been a big fan of the early days of stop motion, things like Tim Burton's Vincent or the early days of something like Wallace and Gromit. And I think that's something that instantly pulls me into Elliott's mind here, is that I love the look of his films. I love the look of his short films as well. He is able to bring kind of this crude sensibility to the characters and the overall design while also making it feel incredibly artistic and unique. So I'll just start this off by saying that I think that this film looks beautiful. I think the stop motion animation here is stunning, and if you are like me and you're a big fan of early days of stop motion animation where the character designs are a bit crude and everything looks a bit wonky but it just feels artistic and unique to you, then I think you're really going to enjoy the overall aesthetics of this film, Memoir of a Snail. Before we get into my personal thoughts though, let's get into what this movie is all about, and then we'll talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. Memoir of a Snail opens up and introduces us to a brother-sister duo known as Grace and Gilbert Puddle. The two of them are together, they love each other, everything is good and dandy, but then things start to kind of go south when unfortunately their parents pass away and they end up finding themselves as orphans. They end up getting split up throughout the course of the early part of the film, and now the movie really focuses on the character of Grace. We see majority of the film through her eyes. This is a young girl who absolutely loves snails, and like a snail, tends to find herself kind of recluse in her shell. And in a lot of ways, this is a film about being stuck in our shell, in the darkness that life can sometimes bring. This is a very depressing tale that showcases a young girl going through a lot of hardships, separation from her family, the loss of her parents, and the various other trials that life will kind of have in her way. Over the course of the film, we get to see how these various trials kind of instill fear in her and end up making her very much like the things that she loves, which is snails. She builds this collection of snail-like things, has snails with her, snails as pets, and majority of the film is her actually speaking to a snail named Sylvia that she's giving this entire story to. Majority of the film is narrated. At times we do jump to her brother's perspective, Gilbert, who's played by Kodi Smit-McPhee, but majority of it does kind of hone in on Grace, who's played by Snook. I think she does a really great job as this character, playing a character that's very lovable, very sweet, very kind, very timid and very shy, very to herself, and you know, ultimately just has a really big heart, but not really somebody who's overly outgoing. Her brother Gilbert, played by Kodi Smit-McPhee, is a little bit more rambunctious. He's a pyromaniac as well, but the two of them love each other, and when they get separated, this film really immediately lets you know what the tone of this film is going to be all about. It really is about, in a lot of ways, depression. It's about depression, it's about anxiety, it's about the way that the darkness of this world can really corrupt us and again, make us recluse, make us hide within our shells and hide ourselves from the world, a lot of times not allowing us to live. And I thought it was a really interesting story, and especially the way they tried to play it out with this character Grace having this love for snails and her very much being a snail in and of herself. Throughout the course of the film, though, she would meet some other individuals, most notably an older woman known as Pinky, played by Jackie Weaver, who kind of becomes her rock. This older woman who's got a lot of spunk, a lot of excitement, and is able to kind of bring Grace out of her shell throughout the course of the film. This is a film that is in a lot of ways incredibly depressing. It leans on some pretty heavy things throughout the course of it. It is a movie that is also R-rated, which surprised me because if you look at the overall aesthetic of this, you may think it's a family film, something that kids could watch, but it is pretty crude in a lot of ways. While it isn't necessarily overly vulgar when it comes down to dialogue, it does utilize a lot of things like smoking in the film, as well as a lot of sexual elements. That's where the film really gets its R rating, with there being far more nudity in this claymation world than I ever expected there to be. So I should say there is a lot of sexual activity happening in this claymation film. But yeah, overall, this is really a film about the hardships of life and how a lot of times we can blind ourselves to the good things that happen in life, how there are good things that still happen in life, and we tend to focus on the negative. And that's something I could really relate to, because as somebody who's really struggled with anxiety over the course of the last few years in a way that I never did, I have found myself kind of becoming a bit of a recluse in certain areas. Of course, I still do this channel, I have a lot of friends, I'm still a pretty outgoing person, but I do tend to kind of live in fear in my mind, whether it be about health, whether it be about the next day, whether it be about money. I tend to just live in this place of fear, and I think this film tackles something that a lot of people can really relate to, which is depression, anxiety, fear, and the way that that really just creates this shell around us and has us push away the good things in life, and oftentimes blinds us to when those good moments come. You may be able to look back and be like, oh, I wish I would have appreciated that more, but this film at its core is really about trying to see the beauty in life as it's happening. And I think that seeing this through the eyes of this really sad young girl named Grace as she ages up is really interesting. I thought that the character of Grace and Gilbert were both really interesting over the course of the film. I think the voice cast here is really strong. I think the overall animation of the film is incredibly beautiful, and I do think that the film has a nice unique weirdness to it that I enjoyed quite a bit. With all of that said, I can't say that I necessarily loved the film, and I think the reason for that is I think sometimes the film leans so far into bizarre that it oftentimes, for me, felt like it was undercutting its message. Because of that, sometimes it felt like it lacked focus. By the time we got to the end, it felt like it all brought everything full circle. It felt like there was a nice bow on top. So by no means do I think that this film leaves holes in its narrative, but at times it feels like it's asking you to take part in a very cute, charming, but very real story, only for it to have these moments that feel so bizarre and that just feel like they almost stop the movie in order to be strange and be bizarre. Some of the things that happen in this film to Grace, specifically when she gets older and she starts to meet somebody who is more of a romantic interest, there's certain things that happen that feel like they're just so off the wall that it just feels overly bonkers, overly bizarre, in a way that for me kind of took away from what the film was trying to say at times. It didn't ruin it for me in any way, shape, or form, by no means. And I do also feel like the bizarre natures of this film will honestly work for a different audience. But me personally, there was something about the way that the film leaned into the bizarre at times that it oftentimes kind of cut away from the really touching moments that this film had. It didn't ruin it for me. I still am far more positive on this film, and I do think it's a film that is worth your time. But there were moments in this film that I wondered, did that really need to be there? Could we have breezed past that? And because of that, it did feel like there was a lack of focus in certain moments. With all that said, though, I do think Memoir of a Snail is an interesting film, a film that's not going to work for everybody. I think if you're not a fan of stop-motion animation, I don't necessarily think that this is going to be the film that wins you over. If you are not really a fan of slower storytelling that really kind of takes the whole picture for you to see the whole picture, then this may not be for you as well. And also, this is a really heavy film. It's very depressing for majority of the film. It's very sad. While it has these great touches of charm and cuteness and some light and overall a nice message, it is ultimately a film that asks you to kind of go on a pretty depressing story for a majority of it, and it's going to work for some people and not work for others. I also feel like that bizarre element of it is going to put certain people off. But with that said, this is certainly the kind of film that I can see will have a very strong cult following, with certain people just not really enjoying it. I don't think this is a film that everybody will love, but it is certainly a film I think a lot of people should check out, because I do think it's easily one of the most unique films of 2024. And if you're a fan of stop motion animation and you've been dying to see a new film in that genre, then this is definitely something you should put on your radar. So that's going to be my thoughts on Memoir of a Snail. Are you planning on checking it out? Have you already checked it out? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.